God, I've sent him to rehab numerous times, and each time he was doing well, everything would simply go back to normal. I was set up, after all, if you've heard the same tale from a million people. There is a conspiracy here. A loud proclamation at the precise moment Rick Harrison was found guilty of several major federal offenses and given a life sentence. Tax evasion, artifact smuggling, and money laundering. The footage of that occasion started to circulate quickly within minutes. America was stunned. The media landscape exploded old. The questions were torn apart. A well-known person fell apart. Rick, who used to be the humorous man behind the counter of the most well-known porn shop in the nation, was now incarcerated after being accused of a crime. However, is that the entire narrative, or is there a more complex or significant game at work where Rick was merely a pawn? Whispers began to reverberate throughout society. Had we simply seen a conviction skillfully crafted from the shadows, or had this man actually committed these crimes? Rick's unfiltered response, intense agony suffused with emotion, became a man's downfall or the burying of a secret. The picture of Rick Harrison before to the fall. Rick Harrison was not your average television personality, he was not from the entertainment world, he had no acting training, and his image was not shaped by image consultants. Rick's public persona was developed gradually via the complexities of his real life rather than in a studio. A path filled with obstacles, resiliency, and unanticipated possibilities. Born in Lexington in 1965, North Carolina, Rick had epilepsy, one of the most lonely and debilitating disorders a youngster can have. Deep emotional wounds were left by the uncontrollable seizures, the shame from classmates, and the constant anxiety of never leading a normal life. But rather than shattering him, it strengthened his resolve. His sickness didn't break his spirit, rather, it strengthened his will to overcome. The family eventually moved Buster to Las Vegas, a city that is both brutal and stunning. Alongside his dad, Richard Oldman Harrison, in 1989, Rick established the Gold and Silver Porn Shop. Their first objective, despite having little money, was to transform the porn industry rather than merely survive. Business was thought to be a field frequently linked to fraud and abuse. Rick assisted in transforming the store into a historically significant space where each item had a backstory and each transaction was a cross-cultural interaction. In 2009, the History Channel debuted a reality show about their shop, which marked his television debut. Nobody anticipated its meteoric rise in popularity. Porn stars were a clever fusion of history, culture, family humor, and astute financial acumen. It wasn't simply about buying and selling. Without a script, Rick, the anchor, was able to recognize an Edito-era katana, determine the legitimacy of a Roman coin, and make quick, astute economic choices. Rick came to represent practical intelligence to the general public. He was friendly and witty rather than ostentatious or pompous, and his specialty was price negotiating laced with caustic humor. His firm handshakes, honest counsel, and a close relationship with his father, his mentor and business partner, painted a picture of a guy who was both stern and kind. Because of his genuineness, viewers were able to trust Rick virtually without reservation. Unlike other reality series, Porn Stars wasn't about drama or scandal. It moved slowly, thoughtfully, and with emotional depth. Therefore, when the news of Rick's inquiry and life sentence surfaced, the shock was caused by a profound emotional betrayal rather than merely the seriousness of the allegations. People were shocked by Rick had acted improperly since they had relied on an image that seemed genuine for more than 10 years. As a result, when Rick sobbed and yelled that he was being set up, many people immediately decided to believe him since they felt that he couldn't be a criminal. However, is that belief based on reality, or has religion clouded our judgment? Beginning of the decline from federal indictment to tax audit, it was impossible to foresee that Rick Harrison's demise would not begin with a spectacular demise, but with an apparently innocuous tax audit in 2018 for a company that had been in existence for almost 30 years, been on national television, and drew millions of tourists each. Although audits were anticipated, this time the IRS inspectors discovered more than a few anomalies in the books. They discovered evidence of a sophisticated financial network, questionable activities, and unexplained cash flows. What started out as a routine IRS investigation quickly grew to include The FBI, the Department of Justice, and the Bureau of Civil Enforcement. The audit quickly evolved into a comprehensive federal criminal probe. Allegations of money laundering, illegal artifact trade, and eventually connections to a global ancient smuggling organization took precedence over Harrison Enterprises Incorporated and the corporate owner of a gold and silver porn business. Prosecutors claim that Rick Harrison was accused of participating in a financial scheme intended to divert funds from the sale of antiquities with questionable provenance. These objects ranged from 17th-century European coinage to ancient Greek coins and Egyptian figurines. Artwork to artifacts from native cultures through middlemen, a large number were directed into the store. Some were linked to unapproved archaeological sites or pilfered museum collections. The global reach of the network, not only the nature of the articles, was what made the case of national and international significance. The indictment claims that transactions with shell corporations domiciled in Malta and Panama crossed international borders. And Switzerland. Allegedly, the network included organized crime groups and affluent collectors who worked behind the scenes in the financial and cultural industries. Large volumes of money were being pumped into the system through the acquisition of artifacts and their subsequent resale to foreign customers, according to testimony from former workers and encrypted emails and banking data that authorities confiscated. Rick was charged with planning or intentionally permitting this system to function in his own shop. At first, Rick responded with disbelief. He declined interviews with the media and simply made a brief statement via his attorney. "We follow industry rules and act openly and legally," but that silence only increased public mistrust. While fans of porn stars held onto the belief that Rick was witty, moral, and intelligent, the media started to portray Rick as the heir not just to a porn business but also to a machine designed to manipulate culture for financial gain. Split public opinion. People who thought Rick was a victim of a system that targeted him because he was too successful and well-known were on one side. Others, on the other hand, believed that he was a cunning businessman who knew the law, took advantage of every opportunity, and voluntarily walked the fine line between ethics and legality. The FBI raided the gold and silver porn shop in early 2019 in response to mounting pressure. Previously recording multi-million-dollar transactions, television cameras now showed investigators removing documents, computers, antiquities, and cash stacks from a rear room. The moment ripped off the innocent facade of what was hailed as one of the finest reality shows in America. Federal tax evasion, laundering through offshore businesses, trafficking of stolen cultural property, using foreign bank accounts to conceal income, and connections to globally scrutinized organizations were all shocking to the public when the indictment was ultimately revealed. There was a potential 10 to 25-year sentence for each crime. Together, they depicted a future in which Rick might never be free. Legal experts into the conflict. According to some, Rick was used as a scapegoat to send a message to those making money off of cultural appropriation because the issue had become politicized. Some claimed it was a natural outcome of unbridled financial and media power running amok for too long. Rick said nothing, but close sources claimed he was heartbroken, sleep-weary, and felt deceived. He was also allegedly planning a counterattack. Via something much more intimate, his voice and his feelings, rather than via legal wrangling. His humanity, he thought, that may make people aware of what he described as a contrived case. And he accomplished that in a momentous courtroom moment where he was not only found guilty but also made the world hear the last cry of a man who had previously been praised as a national hero. However, we must go to the next chapter, where Rick was given a life sentence and the trial was crucial, in order to comprehend what actually happened at that moment. The federal courthouse in Nevada was completely occupied on the morning of the sentencing hearing. There was tension in the air. Like a thick fog in the air, there was a long line of reporters outside the gates. While opponents stood silently holding copies of the indictment as a reminder of the reality, supporters of Rick Harrison gathered with banners. Rick sat at the defense table, his eyes hollowed out from exhaustion, but his stance remained straight. 6 months of testimony and over 2 years of research later, he was set to hear the final. The first decision that will permanently change the rest of his life. In the last days of the trial, the proceedings had progressed past merely technical legal arguments. Each accusation had been refuted. The cryptic financial dealings, the testimony of former employees were recovered by the tangible evidence.